Day one of free agency is in the books, and the Detroit Pistons have made two signings. They brought back Marvin Bagley, and they made a low-key signing for Kevin Knox. What are reactions from day one of free agency, and what is going on with the team construction? We'll talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. Thank you for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. And make sure you head over to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Okay, we got day one of free agency in the books. We brought on a guest, friend of the show. You guys have heard of him many, many times on the podcast. Bryce Simon hosts the Pistons Pulse podcast. Bryce, we got day one of free agency in the books, or at least it should be. We got like an hour and a half until it technically is over. We're recording this at like 10:30. So hopefully nothing else happens with the Pistons. I don't think anything else will. But we've had a few things happen. I think it's kind of called into question, or people are a little confused about what the hell is actually going on with this team and this roster construction. What's this rotation going to look like this year? Just what's going on. But before we get into the team construction, let's talk about the signings that have already been made. So we're going to start with the bigger one, obviously. Marvin Bagley, he's resigned to the Detroit Pistons for 3 years, $37 million. Bryce, what was your initial reaction to hearing the news of Bagley returning?
You mean Troy Weaver's not going to sign somebody or make this big trade at midnight tonight while we're all he's going to do it while we're all just to troll us so we all wake up in the morning and feel like we missed it. Yeah, so Marvin Bagley, this was roughly what I thought. I know Wes over at the Pistons Pulse helps me out with the Motor City Hoops stuff, and he produces the podcast. He thought that Marvin Bagley III might get $15 million, and I was like, no, man, there's no way. I would let Marvin Bagley III walk at $15 million. I was hoping something closer to 10 or less. So, what is it, 12.5 or something like that is not crazy. I think the most surprising thing for me was no team option. Like Troy Weaver loves his club options, and he didn't get one with Marvin Bagley III, which I thought was just interesting, if nothing else.
Yeah, so my initial reaction, was, oh, this is fine. This is basically kind of expected. We all knew that Marvin Bagley was going to be returning to the Pistons. So initially I was just like, oh yeah, well, that's kind of like what I expected. And I sat there and continued to look at it. I continued to look at it and continued to look at it. And then the news came out that there was no team option. And the more I looked at it and the more I sat on it, the more I don't want to say don't like it, but the more I went from just like, oh yeah, that's what I expected to. That's you're trending. You're walking the line there. You're definitely getting close there. The problem is Marvin Bagley, and we've talked about this on the podcast multiple times, is that did Marvin Bagley perhaps play the best ball of his career when he came to the Pistons? Probably. Was the best ball of his career enough in those 19 games, or was it 16 games with the Pistons?
18, I think.
18? Was that good enough to be like a player in a playoff rotation? I don't know. So if you're paying him based off that player...
he's not a playoff player right now.
Yeah, he's not a playoff player.
I'm not saying the Pistons should worry about that, but he gets played off the floor in the first round of an NBA playoff series. I'm talking about like fun. He can't defend. You don't play him in drop coverage. You don't play him in switch coverage. He's bad off the ball defensively. Like, I'm not saying this stuff matters for the Pistons and the regular season and all that. I'm just saying that he's not a playoff player, in my opinion, because of how bad he is defensively right now.
So look, the reason why what Bryce has said matters to me, and you guys will know, I've said on the podcast, this season is more about rebuilding. I want to be a development season. I want them to try to get another top pick next year. So you guys may be asking, why do you care about that? I care about it because the contract's 3 years long, and there's no team option on it. So if it was like 2 years long, I wouldn't care as much. But his contract is getting at the end of his contract, he'll be playing for what appears, or what we're hoping, to be a decent or good team for the Pistons. And if you're paying a guy $12 million that you don't think will be able to play at all, or possibly will not be able to play in his third season, that's when I start to be like, okay, you're walking the line there. But I don't want to make this sound like that where I'm this big Marvin Bagley hater. I like Marvin Bagley. I wanted him to resign. And I don't really have a problem if they wanted to sign him for 3 years. I just feel like that's a little, you're asking for him. In order for him not to be a negative asset at the end of that contract, you're asking for him to be like better. He has to get better. He has to get better defensively. He has to be more well-rounded as an offensive player. He has to add something to his offensive game. Again, as of right now, I'm cool with him coming back to the Pistons. I want him to come back to the Pistons. He fits the need. I love the fact that he's a lob threat. Him and Kade seem to have incredible chemistry. I'm cool with him being on the squad, and I wanted him to come back again. I want to make that clear. It's just that the length of the contract, it's not enough for me to be sitting here like losing my mind, but it's just like you're walking the line. You're definitely betting on him getting better. And I guess that's how I should have started. Troy Weaver 100% is betting on, I like this guy. This dude is my guy. I believe in him, and I think he's going to get better. And if he gets better, he's going to be worth that contract. He has the capabilities. If he can improve defensively or get back to, like I mentioned, I was going to mention it a little bit earlier on Twitter, but there was a season when he shot around 34% from deep on 2.5 a game. Like if he can do that while also being a lob threat, then okay, then even with his defense being as awful as it is, like if he adds more parts to his offensive game, then you can say, okay, I can see even a few years from now, if he can get to that point, okay, that's fine. But I just think that with the length of the contract and plus how much it is, you're walking that line of, okay, you might have overpaid just a tad.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at as well. Like, I'm not going to lose any second of sleep tonight because the Pistons paid Marvin Bagley $12 million a year instead of $9 million a year. And I don't think in the grand scheme of things, it's going to cost them a free agent or make a big move. It actually may play into their hands if they want to make. Kyle Metz actually brought this up, or on the Twitter spaces they had going, if the Pistons want to make a big trade like in 2 years, that $12 million contract might actually be helpful. Like sometimes you need those contracts in that range to execute trades. We were talking about before the show, Kevin Durant getting traded to the Suns, if that's something that could happen, and they don't have a ton of contracts in that range. And so it makes it hard for them to get all the money together. So I don't think it's something to lose sleep over. It was a little more than I thought. And I do wonder, Koo, do you think he got this contract because his value seemed higher because the Pistons had nobody else like him on the roster? Like if there was another lob threat on the roster, do you think we would have kind of been as impressed with him as what we were?
You see, what you just that point right there is exactly what I've talked about on the podcast a lot. It's not, and again, it's seriously going to come off as like I'm a Marvin Bagley hater, and I really don't want to come off like that because I really do like Marvin Bagley. He did great stuff for the Pistons last year, and he has a chance to grow into this contract. I'm not trying to hate on Marvin Bagley. We've praised Marvin Bagley a lot in the podcast, so I just want to preface it with that before you guys start destroying me. But I've said that on the podcast multiple times that like Marvin Bagley was good for the Pistons, but he was not like some great player. Like the bigger point that I've always made with it is the fact that simply adding Marvin Bagley, a dude who is not very good defensively, can't space the floor, isn't great with doing stuff with the ball in his hand, simply because you had a dude who could jump and grab a lob, changed the offense. Like just simply adding that is what changed the offense. So that's always been my thing, is that like, okay, now if you can just build upon that, if you can get a guy, and I know I don't want to make it sound like I'm some big stan of this guy, because it's probably going to sound like that by the time the season starts. But if you get someone like kind of like Nerlens Noel, who's a low usage guy that can play defense, rim protect at an extremely high level, and also do that stuff offensively, now you're really cooking. But like you said, I think it is a little bit to do with the fact that the Pistons just severely lacked any kind of athleticism in their front court last season, that when Marvin Bagley showed up, it was so bad of a need that acquiring him made just a world of difference. And I've always questioned that, was it really Marvin Bagley being great, or was it the Pistons severely lacking what he does good so badly it made him look like he was like Thor or something? Like it made him look like a god or something. I've questioned that.
And the interesting thing is, and I'm sure you've talked about it, is Jalen Duren is that guy. You know, the pick out of Memphis, the big man, is going to be a lob threat. Like if he steps on the floor, and I kind of wonder more now if maybe he is the guy that ends up playing a little more G League early in the season and doesn't get a ton of rotation minutes early. He is only 18. But if he does step on an NBA floor, he's going to be a guy that can catch lobs, defend the rim, and those type of things. And so he does bring that just vertical pop and athleticism that we're talking about. So I do find it interesting. They drafted a guy that does that as well, but then also kept Marvin Bagley III on this contract. And I'm sure we'll talk, or you've talked about it, so maybe not as much, but Nerlens Noel also. So they went from nothing. Think about where they were at the trade deadline last season. KO and Stu, and that was it.
Luka
Garza. It was real Luka and Frank. But now they got 3 guys. So
Troy Weaver said we're not doing that again. We're making sure that don't happen again.
Kade and Killian are going to be able to throw the ball up to the rim, and someone's going to be able to go up and finish that play. Hey, how about Luka Garza, Portland Trailblazers Summer League?
Congratulations.
Thursday night, opening night against the Pistons. That'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But what Bryce just mentioned in that whole soliloquy that he just gave, we're going to be talking about in this upcoming segment. I think that kind of is where, I'm not going to speak for Bryce, but I'm going to guess that that's kind of where the hesitation, or at least the questioning a little bit from Bryce, from me, from a lot of Pistons people is just the roster kind of doesn't, it really is confused. Like, what's going on exactly? Like, if the roster made a little bit more sense, people, I don't feel like, would be like questioning the Bagley deal as much. But now it's just like, dude, what's going on? We'll talk about the roster construction, what could possibly be the plan, or whatever the hell is going on. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I got to tell you guys a little bit about one of our sponsors, Arcade 1UP. We have big news. The one, the only, NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1UP, the leader in at-home retro arcade games, is not only bringing the best game ever back, but they've made it bigger than ever before with, wait for it, the Shaq Edition machine. Jump clear across the court and set the ball on fire in one of the first sports games ever to feature real and digitized NBA licensed teams. No fouls, no free throws, and no quarters required. Compete with friends and family through an all-new Wi-Fi leaderboard, making you more connected than ever. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's arcade, the number 1, up.com for an estimated early September ship date. Arcade 1UP is the place for fun. They got even more classics like Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat, and many others starting at just $399. And check this out. They're giving away an NBA JAM Shaq edition to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win the game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade, the number 1, up.com/lockedon. You've got till July 8th to enter to win NBA JAM Shaq edition console. Don't miss out and enter today. Who are you going to play with? With Arcade 1UP. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the podcast. On our way to our new goal of 5,000 subscribers. Since we made that goal like 3 days ago, we've already gained like 500 subscribers. So we're getting close to halfway there already. We're growing pretty fast. Continuing to show Locked On that we're the best and fastest growing fan base at the Locked On Network. I appreciate all of you guys' support. I really do. But Bryce, let's talk about this roster construction, man. Because that first segment, I already know it. I know it. It's going to come off as like a Marvin Bagley hating segment. And I really did not want it to sound like that. But I feel like after this segment, people will understand a little bit more why it's like there's questioning a little bit about it. And that's just because of the roster construction. So let's just look at it this way. They got Kade and Ivy in the backcourt, what seems like that's going to be, I mean, unless they start Alec Burks at the 2 guard, but I don't think that will happen.
Joseph.
Let's please, God, please no. So they got Kade and Jaden Ivey.
I've been on Twitter too long. I've learned how to troll really, really well.
No, yeah. See, that will happen. Even for an old man like Bryce, he'll catch on to the younger.
I was really an old man tonight, Koo. I got by the fake Woj
I saw,
account.
yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
The fake Woj account got you. I saw
Bryn Forbes, I was so excited. A shooter. I'm such an idiot, man. I'm so mad at myself. Sorry, we went off the rails here. My bad.
We all got. I got a few years ago by the same exact count. I do not like you, Andre Stans. If you happen to be listening to this, I do not like you. Anyways, so they got Kade and Ivey in the backcourt starting, and then coming off the bench, they got Killian and Alec Burks. Starting small forward, it appears, unless they get creative, but let's just assume that Dwayne Casey
doesn't get creative.
Yeah,
definitely. Dwayne Casey's not creative.
Yeah, let's just assume that Dwayne Casey does not get creative. I know we may be taking a big risk there, but let's just assume that. You got Sadiq Bey at 3, sounds like maybe Isaiah Stewart at 4, and then Nerlens Noel at 5. So then already in the starting lineup, you're looking at some, at the very least, questionable spacing. And then if you go to the bench lineup, you're looking at Killian, Alec Burks, Isaiah Livers with
KO and Bagley, I think, is who you have left.
Yeah, Kelly Olynyk and Marvin Bagley. And
you have decent spacing with that lineup, actually.
Yeah, you have decent spacing with that one, but then that's assuming you're sending Jalen Duren down to the G League, and he's just not playing.
And Hami's not in the rotation, and Coach Casey's not going to play Corey Joseph at all, all.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of questions going on with this roster construction, and like Bryce mentioned earlier, I think one of the reasons why I'm questioning the contract a little bit, not simply bringing back Bagley, but the length that they brought him back at. The reason why it's a little bit like at least head scratching a little bit to me is that, like Bryce said, you got basically Marvin Bagley in the draft, what you're hoping it's a better version of Marvin Bagley, like a Robert Williams type, a prime DeAndre Jordan type, like that kind of player in the draft with Jalen Duren. So 2-3 years down the line, I mean, maybe not this year, Duren may not be playing, but 2-3 years down the line, you're figuring that he's going to be your guy. So it's just like, and even this year, I feel like you're picking now, and if the roster stays the same, you're either picking the starting lineup to have no spacing, or you're picking the backup lineup to have no spacing. Like, one of those two are going to happen, unless, again, they get super creative. And again, I'm just going to say I don't think that will happen. What are you making of this roster, Bryce? You can hear the question and the confusion in my voice. What are you thinking?
Well, I do want to stay on Marvin Bagley Duren thing because I think it comes back to the third year thing. I think both of us, if there was a team option on year 3, we'd feel a lot better about the contract, even at the money that it was made. And I think it's because we both believe in 3 years, Jalen Duren's going to be a better player than him. And so if you believe in Isaiah Stewart or if it's somebody else, whatever, like, not that that's a bad contract for Marvin Bagley III to be coming off the bench, but I think that's why it's a little bit questionable, because it's like Duren's going to be that dude anyway. So why don't you want to give yourself an out if Marvin Bagley doesn't get any better? Like, it's just the team didn't protect itself at all. Now it's still only $12 million. If he plays halfway decent, maybe you can trade it. Like, it's not an end of the world. Okay. So yes, I don't want it to come off like hate. And we both really like Marvin Bagley on the roster. Okay. The roster in totality. What's funny is we're not questioning the talent on the roster. Even though it's not very good. I don't think this roster is any more talented than last season. And if it is, it's only a little bit. I don't know. We can talk about that maybe in segment 3. We can get into it a little bit. But it's just wonky. It's like super weird. And the shooting, man, like, so I tweeted this out the other day about Jaden Ivey. And I spent 3 months.
You guys are listening to a college shooter right now. This is where this is coming from right
now.
I'm just messing with you.
Not a very good one. Not a very good one. Jaden Ivey, everybody talked about how he played in a bad system at Purdue because there was always 2 bigs on the floor, right? We've all heard this. Well, now he's going to play with 2 bigs on the floor at all times.
Exactly.
Last year, what did we hear about Kade Cunningham? He didn't have any floor spacing at Oklahoma State. No shooters around him. Last season, the Pistons were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league. And on paper, right now, it doesn't look like this team is going to be any different. And I think that's a little bit frustrating for me.
Yeah, it's at the very least questionable.
Sure.
Because like, I understand, I've been the main one. I feel like I'm one of the main ones pushing that I've wanted this season to still be a rebuild year, a development year. I want them to still be like top 3, top 4 odds to try to be in that stacked draft class next year. So I guess in a kind of like a different perspective, you can look at it and be like, if that's what's going to hold them back from being too good of a team to get them out of that positioning, then so be it. But then also it's like, play along with me here, Bryce. I've said this on a few times on the podcast. Let me know if you agree. Killian's rookie year. Now, Killian didn't play a lot his rookie year because of his injury, but his rookie year, that team wasn't good. It didn't have a lot of talent. It was never going, even if Killian played the whole year, you want to think that he develops whatever. That team wasn't going to be good no matter what. However, Killian's rookie season team, that team was competent. Like it made like the archetypes made sense. Like the team made sense. They were able to run competent offenses. They were able to actually have adequate spacing. Now the players weren't good enough to take advantage of said things, but they were able to run like a competent offense. They had a lob threat center with Mason Plumlee, a guy who could also create some from the high
short
post.
Roll pass. Yeah,
short roll pass. Made some sense. Yeah, Jeremy Grant, the 3 and 4 with him and Sadiq. That made sense. You like it just the overall the roster made sense. It wasn't good, but it made sense. So it made more of an enjoyable viewing. I feel like that helped more with young guys' development. When your team makes sense and it's competent, and they can like run things, then I think it's better. I think you would say the opposite about this past season for like until February, mid-February, the roster was horrible and didn't make sense at all. They weren't even able to run any kind of offense really because they had no pressure on the rim. They had no lob threat. They had no shooting. It was terrible for a lot of the young players. Sadiq struggled for a long part of the season. Kade had to deal with nonstop double teams and reaching in on drives and no space to drive. Like he was working with a very suffocated court. Same thing with Killian Hayes. Like a lot of these guys dealt with tough scenarios, tough situations last year. And what I said for this upcoming season is I wanted to look more like the first season. They're not good. They're still going to be pretty bad, but at least it makes sense and guys are able to thrive and develop because it at least makes sense on the court. Yeah, as of right now, I just don't think it does. I don't think it does make sense right now.
So that's interesting. Like, who's the short roll passer on the team of the big? Like Stu, I think Stu may develop something offensively, hopefully the 3-point shot, but I don't believe in the passing. I don't believe it with it Marvin Bagley III. Like, I haven't watched the Nerlens Noel film yet, but I'm assuming he doesn't do it well, like just by the assist numbers, which don't always tell the whole story. And Jalen Duren, who may have the best upside as a passer, is only 18 and, probably isn't going to get those opportunities. So, like, I like where you're going with this. So, like, I don't know how they would have done this. The offseason would have been completely different. But what if instead of Nerlens Noel, you had Mo Bamba, who is a young guy who stretches the floor, right, and can block shots? Now you have floor spacing from the big man position. And instead of bringing back Hami, maybe you go sign a guy like Malik Monk, who not the athlete, not very good defensively, but has shot, I believe, above 40% from 3 the last 2 seasons. Now, all of a sudden, you look at those lineups and it's like, oh, we can play Bamba with Stu because he can space the floor. Or we can play Bamba with Bagley because he can space the floor and maybe protect the rim. And then we can put Malik Monk in there with Burks. And now you have Hayes, Burks, and Malik Monk. And you have really good floor spacing in the second. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not saying you could have signed those guys by any means. Like, Bamba went back to Orlando on a decent contract. Monk went to Sacramento on almost $10 million. I just, if there would have been a way to construct a roster that was a little bit more like that, I don't think we'd be scratching our heads quite as much.
Exactly. And I also want to say, I still like the moves that he's made for Burks and Noel. I really do like those moves. I mean, remember this last week, I was applauding him nonstop on this podcast. I'm still going to, because getting those guys, they're good players and they're going to help the team, and they're on team options next year. So they're get guys
great
who are
contracts.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to help you immediately, and they're great contracts to keep your books open for next year. So I thought it was a tremendous deal. I still really like it. It's just very, like Bryce said, I think the best word is just wonky to try to see. And I guess it kind of speaks to them banking, I guess, on Stu being an actual 3-point shooter at 4. You guys know I'm not a believer at all Isaiah Stewart at 4, but it seems like they are. So, I mean, we'll see how it works. But it's just at the very least right now, I think it's just it's going to be bad. I think no matter what they do, it's just going to be bad spacing unless they get, again, creative and sit one of the bigs, like another one of the bigs just doesn't play. I think it's wonky, and it's going to be a little bit interesting to see how it goes.
Well, and I think why it's important, because you're right. Like, it's not about the talent or the winning, because a lot of people are with you. Like, it's okay if we only win 30 games again and are in the race for Victor Wembanyama or the Twins or Scoot Henderson or whoever it is. But it's about the development of Kade and putting in a good position. It's about Jaden Ivey having a successful rookie season. Even Killian Hayes, like, all of those guys need floor spacing. They need bigs. Marvin Bagley, like, this would be the counter to our argument, Koo. Like, heck yes. I almost cussed. I'm sorry. Heck yeah, he's worth $12 million a year because he's the lob threat on this team to play with those guys. And so maybe just because of that, just their development, he's worth that money. And so I think that's why it's a little bit concerning, questionable. Like, I wonder why those things haven't been taken into account a little more, or maybe they were and Weaver just wasn't able to execute it for whatever reason.
Yeah, and before we move on, I just want to say this. We'll move on to another signing that the Detroit Pistons made today or last night when you guys listen to this. But one of the things I want to say before we get there is that I could see this season. I think if I want to put myself in Weaver's shoes, I think he's probably looking at it like this, which I don't think this is going to be awful. I'm not trying to criticize him. I just think this is how he's probably thinking. I think he's probably looking at this season looking a lot like last year, that the team's going to struggle for the first 4 months of the season. He'll be able to flip Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks for assets at the deadline, which will be good. And then after the deadline, maybe you'll probably be able to put out a team on the floor that makes more, maybe not better. Like, I don't think people would just say that Jeremy Grant. I mean, I know Jeremy Grant's gone, and I wasn't a big fan of him, but it's not like I don't think anyone really thought that just simply having him off the team and nothing replacing him was going to make them all of a sudden a 40-win team. But maybe the roster will look more, or the lineup on the floor will make more sense. And then you'll start to see a little bit better gameplay and a little bit more development from your young guys that way in the second half of the season after they get some of those contracts off the books. I think that's probably how he's looking at. We're going to struggle the first 4 months. That will keep us in the lottery odds. That will keep us in the top 3. I'll trade these guys for assets. And then after the All-Star break, we'll play a little bit better. We'll show some promise and things to make us believe and everything while still maintaining open cap space in the offseason and also having a top pick. That's the way I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, man, he's setting us up for another crazy offseason next year. So, I mean,
for
people like me and you and content creators, Troy Weaver is incredible.
I was saying that in the last podcast. He's absolutely incredible for people like us. Absolutely incredible. When we come back, though, the Pistons made another signing. It was for Kevin Knox. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is a continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. And again, you can go to the NBA when it's back in session. You got college basketball, you got NFL, college football, tennis, all kinds of things. And if you head over to the basketball section right now, you can already get started on next year's NBA season. Who's the favorite? Who do you think is going to win the championship? Rookie of the year? All those kind of things already up there at BetOnline.net. So again, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about their trends and action today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the podcast. I'd really appreciate it. But Bryce, so the Pistons signed Kevin Knox to a 2-year, $6 million deal earlier tonight. What's your initial thoughts on that? Actually, you know what? I let you get your initial thoughts last time. Let me do my initial thoughts first. So I'm not going to lie to you, Bryce. I actually really like this signing. I think this is a really nice signing. I don't think Knox has proven to be a good player at all thus far. But if you guys remember, throughout the entire offseason, I've been sitting on the podcast talking about the Pistons need to let go Hamidou Diallo and Frank Jackson and replace them with the same type of players, take a chance on a different player, and just keep recycling those type of guys until you hit on one, like New Orleans did with Jose Alvarado or like OKC did with Lou Dort. Just keep recycling these two-way or cheap deals for guys that have potential, who are young guys that you think you could possibly get the potential out of them that haven't worked out yet, like they did with Josh Jackson too. They did that with him. Just keep doing that until you hit on one of them. They let go of Frank Jackson. I don't know. I'm a little bit confused why they brought back Diallo, but they did. Either way, I think Kevin Knox was on my list of like young guys to take a chance on if you wanted to replace Frank Jackson with one. So they did that with Kevin Knox. I'll let you get your initial thoughts in because I actually have like something creative and I'm going to throw it at you after you give us your initial reaction.
Yeah, so this is probably the guy I'll dive into the film first of all the 3 new players with Noel, Burks, and Knox, just because he's kind of the most interesting, maybe the one that I don't know the most about. Like we know Burks is a shooter, Noel's a shot blocker, rim lob threat. The thing with Knox is, so here's the difference. I feel like Josh Jackson had an avenue to playing time, right? Like, I don't see the avenue to playing time for Knox unless KO is moved. Like, I mean, like, if I look at the two deep right now, even if you put maybe you put Livers over Hami, but is Knox going to get time over Hami? Like, Knox is probably player 13 on the roster. And so I still, again, it's $3 million to, like, I wonder if there's a team option on the second year on his or not. Like, I don't know if any of that stuff has come out or not, but I agree with you. Take some flyers on these guys. He had a really good rookie season. That's what's interesting. He was a highly rated recruit coming out of college, got drafted by the Knicks after playing at Kentucky, had a really good rookie season numbers wise. Like, he averaged, almost 13 points a game, 34% from three. And then, some coaching changes. Tibbs is known for being tough on young players. But the overall numbers haven't looked good since then. So I think it's definitely a flyer, but I'm fine with Troy Weaver kicking the tires on him.
So do you think at all that signing Kevin Knox will be used as we tried to address outside shooting kind of thing? So I feel like Kevin Knox is the archetype. He's not actually a great outside shooter as of yet. He's had 1 year when he shot near 40%, but outside that, he hasn't been a great shooter. Do you think that that's going to be like, do you think that's their idea of like, we're going to get a guy whose archetype fits into a guy who's going to stand still and shoot threes and catch and shoot? Do you think that's like what they were going for there?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, his catch and shoot numbers aren't awful. Like, if I use Instat, I know you use Synergy. I was just looking at his Instat numbers, and they're okay. But again, I believe the shooting percentages overall from three have gone down. Well, he was 39% 2 years ago. He just hasn't played very much, Koo. Like, that first season,
he doesn't have a lot of sample size.
He played 30 minutes almost in his rookie season and then just got less and less every year. The Knicks obviously got better there, like would have been his year 3 season, and then obviously got traded to Atlanta, who was competing. So, again, I like it, but I also don't see the pathway to playing time right now. So that's what's kind of interesting with it as well.
All right, so since you brought that up, we'll segue this into talking about that. One way that could free up possible playing time for him is if Kelly Olynyk is moved. And I'm not saying we're not talking about, we need to try to get Kevin Knox some minutes. So that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is, what I wanted to take it was, do you think Kelly Olynyk's going to get moved this offseason before the season starts?
I honestly don't want him to right now.
Because of spacing?
Unless we're willing to play Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Livers at the 4.
That's what I was going to say.
Or if Stu can shoot the 3. Like, there's some people, I talk to Amari Sankofa is my co-host on the Pistons Pulse. Him and I talk about stuff all the time, right? Like, I get he doesn't tell me stuff. Like, he legit doesn't. I've said that before on your podcast. He doesn't, feed me information. But I get the vibe from him that either he believes or whoever he talks to believes that Stu is legit going to be able to shoot threes. And I think other people around the Pistons act that way as well. So they must be seeing something or have a belief that maybe others of us haven't seen yet. So if he's a 4, if Bay's a 4, if Hami's a 4, I think KO's expendable.
Fair enough. I think if I had to take a guess right now, I think I would say that he gets moved. I think he probably gets packaged with a second-round pick, much like Mason Plumlee did last year, and just move for, I don't know, like maybe salary cap space or something. I don't know. I just think I just feel like he's the one. He provides spacing. I just feel like he's the one dude that's kind of like, he just doesn't really not fit from like a game perspective, but like you have all these other guys who are like young. You want to get minutes for Duran. It seems, at least you think,
at some point
want to find minutes for him. Bagley, Stu, and if you really want Stu at the 4, then he's taking minutes there. If they actually believe in him there. So I don't know. I just feel like that Kelly kind of finds himself in he's not really neat. I'm not that he's not needed, because his spacing is needed, but I mean, like, I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. Like a priority. He's not a priority.
He's not needed if they'd play Bay and Livers at the 4. Like, you know what? I want KO to get traded so that way Marvin Bagley III is the highest paid player on the Pistons. I just think that would be hilarious.
there's the best way to feel about that is that means the Pistons cap moving forward just looks really nice. That's what everyone needs to take away from that.
So I looked really the other day. The Golden State Warriors have 4 players that have double the salary of what Kelly Olynyk has. Double. And KO is the highest paid Piston player. The Lakers, who didn't make the playoffs last year, have 3 players that make triple what Kelly Olynyk makes. Russ, AD, and LeBron all make triple what Kelly Olynyk makes as the highest paid player for the Pistons. Like, it's insane. Like, Troy Weaver and the salary cap and all that stuff it's been something, man. So
yeah, it definitely has.
I could see KO getting moved at least by the deadline, though. Like, you're right. I do want to say this. I'm interested to see if KO is better than what he was last year.
I'm sure he is. He dealt with a lot last year.
COVID. I don't have to tell anybody how serious COVID is. And I think we all know it affects people in different ways. And it just seemed like he was one where there were lingering effects for him after he had COVID and the injury. And it just didn't feel like it was there for him. And, for him just individually, I hope that, because we've all seen how serious it is. So I hope that he's okay in general. But then as a basketball player, I hope he's able to be at 100% as well. And I just wonder if we see that, he fits a lot more with the roster, because I was excited about what he could do. I think he opens up those things we talked about earlier for Kade Cunningham and now Jaden Ivey.
I don't know, man. This roster really the roster just really has me like, Bryce, look, I'm trying to find things to talk about. Like there's a bunch of things to talk about, but it's hard to talk about them because I'm just so confused about what the idea is with the roster, because they still have $10 million in cap space.
Yep.
But yet they're already maxed at roster spots. So like, what's happening? Like I don't understand.
And both two ways already. They already filled both two ways.
And then I don't understand why Hamidou was brought back, because I don't see a pathway to why he would get minutes. And if he does get played, you're really looking at spacing just not mattering even a little bit on the team. But then also, you remember last year when he wasn't getting minutes, they had that little flare up, and he was liking tweets saying "Get me out of here" kind of thing. So it's like, what's going on here, man? What's the plan here? What's going on? Like, what?
Maybe we're gonna go 5 for 5 for 5. Like, just have all three lineups and just 5-5-5 and
yeah,
play
like
them all.
Back in middle school. I said this earlier on Twitter, Bryce. I was like, one of the lineups are going to lack spacing, either the starting lineup or the bench unit. If it stays like this, someone's going to lack spacing somewhere. And someone was like, "Oh, well, Jaden and Kay, they really need spacing. They both have dealt with so much congestion and just no spacing for driving lanes their whole careers. Basically, they obviously whole careers. I mean, going back to college, not NBA careers. So they're like, you need to get spacing somehow in that starting lineup." And I just had to respond with I was like, dude, listen, I get that completely, man, but we ain't about to set up Killian like this to fail, dude. We ain't gonna do this, because Jaden and Kay can deal with it the first half of the season, and people won't be talking about getting rid of them or them not being in the NBA no more. Killian's fighting for his spot in the team. We can't be setting him up. There is no, he'll be fine. The second half of the season, he'll be straight. No, there won't be a second half. There won't be a second half of the season for Killian.
Not with the Pistons.
Yeah, it won't be.
Speaking of Killian and the other news, I guess, that came out today, Summer League roster. You think how many games?
Oh, yeah.
Over, under 2.5 games played at Summer League by Killian Hayes.
Over,
under a half of a minute played by Kade Cunningham.
Under. I don't think he plays at all.
I will be very upset, and I will be there.
I saw what you were saying.
I will be there for the game. And selfishly, I absolutely would love to watch Kade Cunningham play. And if I was there and I saw him get hurt, I would be very frustrated. So I hope it's 0. I don't think Saddiq Bey should play. I would be fine if Stu played, to showcase this pick and pop shooting stuff for a couple games. I actually don't think Killian will play more than 2 games. Let's be positive.
You don't think so?
Because I think if he balls out, they shut him down. That happens a lot with Summer League, I feel like, is if you ball out for a couple games and especially a guy that's going into his 3rd year, then I think they'll shut him down. So
fair enough.
I'm excited about seeing I wish Prashida was going to play. He's not going to play the second round, dude. Balsa's going to be back, though. I am excited to see him. I know a lot of Pistons fans have been interested with him. But I don't. Here's what I just realized. I don't think Duren's going to be playing in the first game.
Yeah, I don't think I think I saw that his trade won't be completed until the 6th.
Yeah, and I think the first game is on the 6th or maybe the 7th, on the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So probably not very likely. So I'm a little disappointed in that. I was hoping to see some highlight stuff between Jaden Ivey, Killian, and Duren. So I may miss him live, but I thought it was interesting those guys are on the roster, but I think it makes sense just to have them around for practices and as they prep and just to kind of be quote unquote, veteran leaders for those young guys. So
yep. It'll be interesting to see, man. I'm about to wrap the podcast up, Bryce, but really, there's just like, so I'm sitting like the whole time that we've done this podcast, I'm sitting here like, okay, I have to try to find a way to make sense of this front court, dude. I just have to. I have to try and make sense of it, but it's just so hard. I can't do it. I can't. I was so happy, Bryce. I was so happy when they got Nerlens-Noel, because Nerlens-Noel's been the center that I've been asking for like a year and a half now. Like, he's been the kind of dude that I've wanted, but now it's just like, dude. If like Stu better be a 3-point shooter, that's all I'm gonna say. He better be able to shoot threes, or that starting lineup's really going to be screwed. I don't see, because we could go on for that 30 minutes. I have to stop.
Hey, if you don't start Jaden Ivey, your second unit could really not shoot it. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like, one of these lineups are going to lack spacing no matter what.
Killian Hayes, Jaden Ivey, Hamidou Diallo, III, Nerlens-Noel. Not a single one of those dudes is a.
They better not play Hamidou. Hamidou better not play a single game, any minutes. Like, he should not be in the rotation. I'd rather play Kevin Knox than Diallo.
I also want to see the Cade Ivey Hayes lineup. I do. People have sold me on that a little bit more, because I know some may not want to hear this, but I think Cade can guard the 3. With that lineup.
You think they'd have Cade guarded? I thought they'd have Killian guarded, because he's probably the stronger one out of all of them.
Yeah, it depends on if Cade's gotten stronger, and probably how good. Like, is the other team's best player? Like, is it the Boston Celtics where Cade has to guard Jason Tatum, or is it, I don't know, somebody else where the best player is the point guard? Is it the Atlanta Hawks where now Killian can guard Trey and Cade can go guard Bogdanovich? So that lineup, I think we'll see it. I wasn't sold on it, but I think it could play together. It'd be interesting. You got to put some shooting with it.
Killian will have to become a decent 3-point shooter to make it work.
Yeah, that's what's up with that lineup is, like, if Cade's dominating the ball, now you got Ivy and Killian off the ball, two guys who need the ball at least at times. So, but I don't know. It'd be interesting, especially if Jaden guards. Better than what he showed in college at times. So
yeah, it'll be interesting, man.
We got a lot of lineups to talk about all
exactly, dude. That's what I was just about to say. There's so many lineups that we can throw out to try and make it work, but it's gonna be interesting, man. It's gonna be interesting.
Troy Weaver keeps on giving, man.
Hopefully, I need to see. I'm not gonna lie to you, Brett. I need to see a trade happen. I need to see something happen to where, like, it at least makes. Like, what happens if Duren goes out and, like, I'm going to extend this podcast like 30 minutes if I keep going. But what happens if Duren just goes out there, dominates Summer League? He's better than people in training camp. Now, how are you playing him? It's like, I don't see it. Like, it's so clogged in the front court. I don't see how you make this stuff happen. I don't know. I can't keep going. We're going to end up going for hours if I keep going. Thank you, Bryce, for coming on.
This is why Locked On never lets me come on. I come on here and we go for 45 minutes for a podcast that's supposed to be 30.
Legit. It was not. We were supposed to go this long, but it's just, hey, stuff happens, man. It is what it is. I'm sure you guys enjoyed it. Thanks, Bryce, for coming on, man. Let everybody know they can find you, your podcast, and you on Twitter.
Yeah. At Motor City Hoops on Twitter, Motor City Hoops YouTube channel, and then check out the Pistons Pulse every Tuesday after you listen to Locked On Pistons. Get another hour in your day of some Pistons content. Listen to me and Omari Sankofa, the second from the Detroit Free Press. Cool. I always have so much fun, man. I appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely, man. Make sure you guys are going and checking out that Pistons Pulse podcast, man. Making it, like you said, your second listen every day. But I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to our YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the podcast. Crazy, maybe not crazy first day of free agency. And I guess I shouldn't really say confusing because we kind of saw the Marvin Bagley signing coming back. But I feel like this, now that it's official, now we're really just looking at the front court and we're kind of, how does it work? But I guess I could say interesting first day of free agency nonetheless, or interesting offseason already. Offseason in totality, that's interesting. We'll talk about it more on the next podcast. But until then, I'll see you guys later. Peace out, everybody. Stay safe and Go Pistons.